topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host, Joyce Joya.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, Googlization, and thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. Hello, Joyce. How you doing this week?
Doing great, Ira. Just great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, excellent. We've got a great show. This is actually the fifth show we're doing this month. It's a long month in March, and it's been Women's History Month, and as we planned some of the scenarios. Some of the weeks, it turned out to be we had a strong focus on women in the workplace. I know you just had your Herman Trent alert came out today.
Yes, and I talked about women.
Here, absolutely. Women returning, re-entering the workforce, vital to recovery, which is absolutely true. And we've got a fascinating guest on today with Dr. Kate Richmond. She is got a little background noise somewhere. So we have got Dr. Kate Richmond. She is a director of gender studies, women in gender studies at Muhlenberg. I had the opportunity to meet her last semester. I was doing my adjunct role in the leadership program there. There was a panel, and it was really about diversity and inclusion, and she was one of the presenters on it, and she was talking about the role of masculinity, not necessarily just men and women, not just that difference, but the role, the impact that masculinity has. And what I thought was fascinating was even on diversity and race of how men and women are treated differently because of those different roles and the psychology of that. So that was absolutely fascinating. And then we have a second guest. We'll follow up, Thomas Michael Hogue, new book. We're going to be talking about profitable growth strategies, but more importantly, he talks about the 7 proven best practices he gleaned from working with German companies and how, and in many areas they used to be Japan that set the standard.
They're way ahead, and so, in some ways they're way ahead of where we are.
No, absolutely. So we've got a great show. It's fast. What I found, and I know we've had a lot of discussions, and through our weeks, I'm sure you're in these discussions. As soon as you become aware of a topic, you sort of go down. It was almost like in my healthcare days, and when I was in my pre-med days and dental school days, every time they brought up a disease, you thought you had it. All the symptoms. As I heard over the last year, a lot of growth opened my eyes up. I think it did to a lot of people with Black Lives Matter, and now the George Floyd trial. We became very, very aware of some of the issues that we took for granted or didn't even know existed. Certainly, it's come up with, especially with this month and exploring the role, the gender gaps and discrimination and sexual harassment with women. But just this morning, again, it's just these things just pop up. There was an article that I got, and it talked about the questions women get asked more often than men in an interview. So even down to the interview, and you go, no, we ask the same questions, but it's how do you ask them? How often are they asked? How, and how does the interviewer receive them? But what are your greatest strengths? I can't see the numbers here. What are your greatest strengths? There's a huge gap between women being asked that question, what your greatest strength is, and men. Only a third of men get asked that question. 2/3 of women get asked that question. What is your greatest weakness? The same thing. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? These were all that women got asked this question more often than men. Why should we hire you? What do you want from this job? Describe a time when you failed. Are you a team player? Every one of those questions is asked more often to women than men. I mean, it's so again, it sort of drives you crazy because you're going down this path and you go, there's a lot of work to do. So we want to be able to.
There is. And by the way, there's a pretty simple solution for that. And that is to use software that does the same thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, using the data that we know, I mean, basically being able to, change. One is awareness, self-awareness. What do we need to do to change it? And to some degree, using the data that we collect that we haven't done to kind of bring that to the forefront. So we want to jump into that. Just before we do that, one thing, there's a poll I've been running. We've been talking about adaptability. Also, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we adapt to this. I have a poll. What's your state of mind? It's very simple. One question should take you all of about 5 seconds to get it done. Appreciate you going up to bit.ly/my state of mind. It's going to ask you, give you a heads up. Are you declining, coping, growing, or thriving? How you doing?
And on some subsequent show, we will definitely share our results with you and tell you what we think they mean. Absolutely,
for sure. I also want to not forget to do this. We'll hear from them shortly, but I want to thank Ngomo for being a sponsor of ours. I really appreciate that, and I love their hashtag Be More. And we're hoping that we're helping everybody be more. We're certainly trying to do that as well. So at this point, let's bring on Dr. Kate Richmond, and we'll continue the conversation. Kate, welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ira and Joyce, for having me. If I could briefly comment on that study,
sure.
I think.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, let's get right into it. There's actually really interesting research about asking women questions that require them to talk about their strengths. For some reason, both men and women experience a backlash when women talk about things that they see as personally strong. So that question, tell me your strengths, is immediately a setup for a woman. Because when she advocates for herself, in general, people have a negative reaction to that. And in fact, when we coach women on interviews about what they can do to improve both their chance of landing a job and also increasing their salary that they'll receive, we tell them to talk about it in terms of a collective, things that they can do with a group or things they can do for their team.
Wow.
Because that seems to result in higher salaries and more likely landing the job. And this research comes out of a social psychology lab at the university, at Rutgers University, by a woman named Lori Redmond, who's been doing years of research on these small biases that show up in the workforce. So I highly recommend looking at that, because a solution seems to be just giving everyone the same question. But what we know is that there are these implicit biases that we hold. So even just having that idea that we could just automate everything might not actually work. It's a little more complicated.
Right. Well, there's so many studies out there, Amazon and Google, that have tried that, and they recognize that they were just as best as they tried, as they were embedding a lot of biases that, again, we just don't recognize are there until we start looking at the data.
This kind of speaks to a question that I think us in psychology are always wrestling with, is that we often think standardization, the same, is fair or will result in equity. But the more and more we lean into this, we realize, no, the same might not actually result in equity. We probably need to be a little more layered in our approach.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is a discussion, because you look at what technology does. I mean, you look at the Amazons of the world, and they're personalizing our experience. And you look at a lot of these other, again, a lot of the e-commerce, is that how did it know, even the Google search, how did it know I was thinking that?
Yeah, really.
I typed in diversity, it's like diversity, and it finishes as a sentence for me. How does it know that? So in the one sense, technology is helping personalize the experience, yet we're trying to standardize diversity and inclusion. We're trying to set rules for it, where the rest of the world is tending to moving toward a one-on-one, that everybody should be treated differently, but fairly. And fairly is not the same.
Right. So, Kate, what do you think are the major barriers that keep women from growth and equal opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are barriers at the structural level, rules and policies that get made that help men in ways that don't help women. One that I can immediately think of is, the requirement that women do a lot of the unpaid caregiving responsibilities, both at home, but also at work. We know that even the highest folks at CEO and the CEOs at Amazon and Google talk about being responsible for attending to the climate of their teams. And that tends to fall on women, remembering birthdays, celebrating retirements. Those are activities that are needed in our companies to create healthy teams, but they are not activities that are paid or going to be the things that get you the added promotion. So it's not just that women are taking care of small children or older adults at home, but they're also doing that kind of work in the businesses. And so one way that we could address the structural inequity there is to reward those behaviors, is seeing them as vital to our company's success, which of course they are. And I think there are normative ways in which women are held back. Things like microaggressions, things like expectations that women act like or perform like the men that came before them. Our work environments were created with a concept that it would be a white male. Straight man who had a partner at home that was supporting most of his work. That model no longer exists. Yet we have not changed our policies or our work days to accommodate that. Now, of course, the pandemic has thrown a wrench into this. It might accelerate work flexibility in ways that could help women. But right now, what we see is that women are leaving the workforce because childcare and adult care has disproportionately fallen on their backs. And until we take responsibility for that, the gender equity issues are not going to change.
Interestingly, that's just what I wrote about this week.
We're getting a little bit of an echo from you there, Joyce. So part of that,
not sure why,
is also it's the collateral. It's kind of it's the collateral damage, because within the pandemic, just from a common sense point of view, is that women are paid. Many women are paid less. Mm-hmm. Their roles were less, even if they're doing the same job, but beyond that, just because of the roles that they had. And therefore, just from a practical matter, whose job do you give up? Who should stay home with the kids? Who should take off work? So a lot of these things that are ingrained in the system that we're trying to close have a lot of collateral damage, which I thought was interesting. You brought up a couple terms, and there's so many things I want to cover in the next couple minutes to talk about in the next couple minutes. One was, we're in this state, and we talk about this all the time. I live in the conversation about adaptability and change and keeping up. But it was interesting, and I think this was in the chapter in the book. You talk about that transformational leaders are transformation in cultures. Transformational leaders, we taught this in the course last semester, is better suited, or women are better at the transformation than the men.
Yeah, we know this. And I think it's also primarily related to how girls and women are socialized. I don't think it's inherent. I don't think it's in women's biology that they just come to be more transformational. I think it's because women are socialized to attend to the interpersonal skills and intrapersonal skills that make people better leaders. Things like empathy, compassion, transparency, authenticity. These are things that women are generally rewarded in doing. But it's interesting, in corporations, there seems to be a real push for competition, for looking at how people can be evaluated or sized up in order to get ahead. And that is a very individualistic way of understanding success. And if you look at the bottom line, if you're all working toward the same goal, a collaborative approach kind of makes more sense. But I don't think every single person who is working in a corporation is looking solely at an end goal for the corporation. They're thinking about their own individual success. And because of that, you end up seeing folks really rewarded for individualized approaches rather than a collective. And this is where the structural questions come into play. Do you reward teamwork? Do you reward a collective success? Or do you reward individuals? Even in the evaluations and assessments we give employees, it is always at the individual level, not at the collective. And those types of changes could really shift companies' climates and cultures.
Yeah, this goes back to one of the things that you mentioned, and then I started to transpose it on everything else. When I heard you on the panel, there was a whole discussion just about masculinity, and again, beyond just what gender are you. And you mentioned that already, that, when a lot of the rules, wages, organizations, hierarchies, rewards and recognition were established within organizations, it really was done from a men's world. I mean, some of them were done in the early 1900s, industrial world. And, certainly at that time, there was only 30%, 32% of the women were actually in the workplace. Now it's in the 60%. I mean, still less, but also the participation rate from men has been declining for 50 years in the workplace, and women's has gone up. Women are now the better educated.
Until recently, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Recently, during the pandemic recession, it went down.
Right. So during that, and again, will it be reversed? More women are. When I went to dental school, there were 160 people in the class. One black, one person of color, 12 women.
Right.
Within 10 years, it was 50-50 women, and that was a problem because a lot of the women were married to other professionals, and they weren't working full time. So there was this whole changeover of that mix. So there's certainly a lot of dynamics. But one of the things that you had mentioned, and I highlighted it on one of the things that you sent me, was that from the masculinity point, the masculine status is hard to earn and easy to lose. But when we talk about aggression is a manhood restoring activity. So you get back to that competitiveness to show the machoism within an organization, which is sort of ingrained in that. But for men of color, for people of color, aggression is bad.
Yeah, it's not perceived the same way.
Right. And then you put that on the women. It is beyond that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So when I started my PhD program, I had planned to do research primarily on women. I was very interested in the psychology of women. And in my first week of my PhD program, I met a man who told me that if I really wanted to understand the stressors and strains that women experience, that I had to also understand how masculinity operates in all of our lives. And it was probably one of the smartest pieces of advice, because from there, I spent most of my PhD program studying the psychology of men and masculinities. And what I've learned is that all of us are asked to ascribe to traditional masculine norms. Women are, trans folks are, men are, it doesn't matter. This is the ideal we hold up in our country as the model of success. Someone who is aggressive, someone who can get to the top with sheer merit, not needing to depend on anyone. This is what we hold up as the ideal. Now, all men experience this stress. And, I learned to develop a lot of empathy for men after I looked at the data and saw the ways in which socialization of boys and then later as men really does create a lot of mental health consequences and physical consequences. We know men die earlier than women. When men go to the doctors, they're less likely to ask questions. They stay in doctors' offices shorter than women do. And this is all wrapped up in this idea that you shouldn't rely on someone, that the sign of dependency is a sign of weakness, which is all about men and masculinity. So what we do know, though, is that not all men experience the socialization the same. So things that get rewarded in white men, for example, are exactly the things that get punished in Black men. So we can talk about, for example, take the president, Donald Trump, who makes this very bold claim about the videos of sexually harassing women, and it gets put off as locker room talk, right? That this is just boys being boys. And no one's even denying that he said it. It's just that they're saying, no big deal. And he becomes the president of the United States. You take a Black man doing the same kind of behavior, and this historically has been the rationale for public lynchings. So things that white men are encouraged and rewarded for doing, Black men cannot do. And another example, if you want to put it in the work world, white men are encouraged to network. Your network is your greatest asset. The more you network, the more you're going to get ahead. I just read research that came out of the Philadelphia Inquirer that they are teaching boys of color to do network avoidance, because when boys of color are seen together, particularly by police, they're seen as a threat. And so your chance of increasing attention from a judicial standpoint is actually higher if you're with other boys of color. Now, that is such a clear example of how masculinity operates differently for white boys and men than it does for boys and men of color. And this is why when we think about the advice we give in the workforce or in the world in general, we have to account for those very clear variations in terms of how we reward certain behaviors and activities in some people and not in others.
Your new book, it's a textbook, but is The Psychology of Women and Gender. And you sent me one of the chapters, which I thank you for. Just in the chapter, in one chapter, you went down the list and you talked about the pay gap, the motherhood wage penalty, gender discrimination. I want to get to these. I'll have you explain these. We know what the glass ceiling is, but sticky floors and glass escalators and the glass cliff. But then you went on, you mentioned networking. You talk about unpaid workplace harassment or sexual harassment, balancing work and family, caregiving, parental leave, childcare. You went down through these topics, and like every one of them is when we talk about trying to fix the workplace and being fair, it's like, there's a ton of work to do.
Yeah, and it's the question that I grapple with every day. Like, what would motivate a man, a CEO who is extraordinarily successful to shift the paradigm? And this is a question we struggle with because some men are more open to it than others. What we know is that men who really endorse these traditional ideas of masculinity, this vision of the individual succeeding at all costs, these are the type of men that when you ask them to shift their thinking around masculinity, they see it as a threat. And rather than actually, shifting, they double down. And you did say, Ira, which is true, that it does appear when they double down, it usually results in some type of aggressive or assertive action, particularly towards women and other men of color, and also gay and bisexual men as well. So, we have to they call it, precarious masculinity. This idea that masculinity, because it's hard to gain and easy to lose, men who are, somewhat invested in masculine norms are going to be the hardest to shift in. And those men tend to be our, state representatives. They tend to be our leaders. They tend to own, the wealth in our country. So it is a challenge that we're facing, which is how do we get men to think differently about masculinity?
We just got to, I want to make sure we cover this. Can you define, again, we pretty much know what glass ceiling is. Sticky floors, glass escalators, and the glass cliff.
Yes, please
I've not
define those for us.
Until I read your chapter, I had not heard those.
Yeah, these are, terms used in the psychology of women quite often. So I encourage folks to keep reading about it. The sticky floor is the tendency for women and people of color to get stuck in middle management. So they never get ahead. So unlike the glass ceiling, which is at the very top, this is the tendency for your middle management to have large numbers of women and people of color. The glass escalator is the phenomenon when a man goes into a female-dominated profession, whether that's education, nursing, healthcare, any kind of hospitality. They tend to get promoted faster and quicker than women. This is why your principals, your superintendents of schools tend to be men, and your teachers tend to be women. The glass cliff is one of my personal favorites because it's so true. It's when women do get promoted into leadership positions at the highest level, they tend to get promoted when the company is failing. So you can think of Yahoo, for example, and other companies who, were celebrated because they finally hire a woman. But the hiring is contingent upon cleaning up a big mess. So of course that sets women up because they're not moving into an already successful company or organization. They are taking on the task of, averting crisis.
Right. Or sadly, blaming her for not being able to turn
Very true.
around, which is, I think, what happened at Yahoo. So that's really interesting. So tell us about the glass cliff. That's the only one you haven't mentioned.
Oh, the glass cliff is that example. Yeah. Is that when women get promoted at the highest, they
that was it. Oh, okay. Right. So what advice, Kate, would you give to HR professionals who want to help their women leaders thrive?
Yeah, I mean, my first advice is include men in the conversation. And because I think, it falls on the shoulders of women a lot. And I agree with Ira's comment at the beginning that self-awareness is a big piece of this. I don't believe that all men want to oppress women. I fundamentally disagree with that. But I often believe that men don't see the way in which the systems are benefiting them. So I think allying with men is critical, that women's issues shouldn't just fall on the back of women, that men are really in a position to shift the climate and could help women, and white folks could help people of color. I mean, this should not only fall on their laps to fix. To advise women, I think a big piece of it is to help women understand systems and to navigate them better. I think as a college professor, I see a big part of my job is to teach what in college we call a hidden curriculum, but in the work environment, I think they need those kind of pieces too. And some of those things are difficult to talk about. Sexual harassment is difficult to talk about. How do you help young women coming in understand how to navigate sexual harassment, which will happen to them? Like, we cannot ignore this is happening. So how do we help them navigate that? And there are things that psychologists have advised to help women lessen it. I don't think they can ever make it go away, but perhaps lessen the brunt of it. And even little tips like when you do an interview, talk about the collective instead of your individual need. I mean, it sounds ridiculous that we have to give women that advice, but it will help.
It sounds like a really good one, actually.
And hopefully, as the only man here, so, again, there's so many things that I just didn't recognize the scope or the intensity or the depth of the role of masculinity. A lot of these things is, hey, just legislate the difference. Let's close the pay gap. But it's so much different from that. If, is with the expectation, with the bar for performance be that much higher when women get equal pay? Are they evaluated differently? And we are just barely scratching the surface here, Kate. I want to be
and if I could just add this one other piece, which I forgot to mention, but just to put on your listeners' radar, one way in which I see men trying to relate to women is to do it within the context of their family. So they think of their wives or their children or their mothers. And I think that's not a helpful framework, because these are your colleagues, not your family. And I think when you go into that framework, it gets paternalistic fast. So that's the other piece of advice that I can offer men.
Yeah, thanks. How can people get a hold of you, Kate? What's the best way?
Sure. I mean, the best way is by email. I teach at Muhlenberg College. Would it be helpful to put it?
We'll have that in the show notes. We'll make sure that we put that in, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I'm happy to talk to anyone about these issues or concerns and point people to the right research.
And if you're interested in the book, I think I saw it up on Amazon, but I'm sure you can get it in any college bookstore, The Psychology of Women and Gender. And it was recognized, it got a couple of awards, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, we received the Distinguished Publication Award from the Association of Women in Psychology, which felt fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kate. I know you got a crazy busy schedule. Appreciate you being here. Hopefully we can help people be more and get this together.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you,
Appreciate it
Kate.
very much. Stay safe. Have a good day.
You too.
Again, we keep bringing these topics up. We barely scratch the surface, but robust in a completely different way of looking at not different way, a more in-depth way, a more comprehensive way of looking at diversity and inclusion from a broad sense, and especially with women. So we are going to take a short break, as we always do at this point. You're going to hear from our sponsors, Ngomu and Success Performance Solution, and then we will be right back with our next guest, and we'll be talking about the profitable growth strategies and 7 proven best practices from German companies.
Yes, we'll be seeing Thomas Michael Hogg.
Thank you.
Imagine growing great employees and advancing emerging leaders for less than $1 a day. The Ngomu app will support your employees in a myriad of ways, from career and personal development to health and wellness. No need to schedule and hold trainings. Just have them access over 90 coaches for live virtual group and one-on-one coaching for whatever topic they need or want to work on. Anytime, anywhere. Learn more at ngomu.com today.
For many people, the bridge to the new normal is too far, too difficult, too scary. Waiting to get back to normal becomes a way of life, filled with fear and despair. But wait, why are those people who dare to travel to the new normal celebrating? Opportunity and growth? How can you get a piece of the action? The bridge between the past and the future, the status quo and the new normal, is adaptability. You have a choice. Which side of the future do you want to land on? Will it be coping and surviving or growing and thriving? Adaptability quotient is the new competitive edge.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter yet, please do that. Go to Googlizationnation.com. You get weekly updates about the show, podcast, webinars. Speaking of the webinar, you just heard about adaptability. The webinar replay is still available. So if you go to successperformancesolutions.com, right at the top, there's a button, and you can watch the replay. Fantastic conversation last week that we had with Heidi Spurge from Cornerstone On Demand, Ross Thornley, and Mary Faulkner from IAHR. Again, getting a tremendous amount of feedback. Some of the responses have just been very rewarding, and I highly encourage you to go up and read that. But right now, we're going to follow up with Thomas Michael Hogg, and he wrote a new book, Profitable Growth Strategies, and what intrigued me, got a release, or I read something about it, talked about, and this fits into our conversation here, trying to accommodate not only women, but accommodate the multiple generations and flexible workplace. He said that the 4-day work week won't solve America's burnout epidemic. And we're certainly experiencing that. And he brings some powerful lessons of what he's learned from working with German companies, of why just saying we're going to go a 4-day work week, and maybe even going to the next step, and we'll talk about that. How do we, what's the new work week look like as we go to remote work?
In terms of hours, days, but it's going to be even more complicated because of COVID, because we're going to have a hybrid workplace, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we talk about management. Again, managers struggled with managing people when they showed up for work. what happens when they're now remote, or some are remote? So hopefully we can, Roxy, if you can bring on, there he is, Thomas.
Hey, Joyce, Ira, it's so nice to be with you.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
to be with you.
So are you in Mexico? Is that where you're?
Yeah, I'm here in Monterrey, Mexico, quite near to the border to Texas.
I love Monterrey.
So So we're international today. Wonderful. So again, I appreciate you being here. It's the first time we've met. You mentioned, as I said, the one thing that caught my attention when I received the email was, again, this thing about the 4-day work week. And as organizations are trying to revise what does work look like, whether they're going remote, whether it's partially, whether it's hybrid, distributed work. I mean, but we've been talking about the 4-day work week for years, and it's not the solution for everybody.
No, it's not. And I guess we should not only talk about the 4 days. I mean, in Germany, the unions, they are historically, they are very strong. And these strong unions, they push the 4 days week into the different companies, and especially in the automotive industry. But also it was of the interest somehow of some of the automotive companies, because it's also in kind of benefiting them. But I guess we should not only talk about the 4 hours week. It goes deeper. When I talk, it goes deeper, I mean, of course, it's about your work-life balance. It's about what's the HR strategy of a company. And you have to see this really much more holistic just than one topic. And then we talk about, home office, we talk about flexible hours, flex time, we talk about salary. But at the end of the day, as a company, you have to look deeper inside and see, okay, how can you develop your people? How can you have a purposeful company where you have kind of this work-life balance?
So you identified 7 best practices. I'm not sure if we can get through all 7, but why don't we start with the most important ones? And I'd also be interested, hopefully we'll have a minute or two with this, or maybe you'll cover this, is what we were just talking about with Kate. When I think of German culture, I'm thinking that it's more of a masculine culture. And are some of the issues we're dealing with now with diversity and inclusion, are they ahead, or is that something they have to work on and as well? So,
I mean, talking about a little bit about first the 7 steps. When we talk about Germany, we talk about quality, and we talk about the quality brands. We know the automakers. And I work for Adidas in Germany, and we're really looking and striving for quality and innovation all the time. Your second question is so interesting, because from my point of view, when you have a chancellor like Angela Merkel leading our country, for me it's kind of normal to have a kind of a female boss and a woman. So I guess this topic, or it's I mean, perhaps also a little bit a personal point of view, but Angela Merkel and many female leaders have done a great job. Have done a great job, especially during the pandemic. Merkel, she did not underestimate the pandemic at the beginning, and she will leave office in some months after 16 years, and we do not know what's going to happen, because of course we will miss her, and the world will miss her, because she gives a great balance. So I guess in Germany you kind of find, obviously, a lot of problems when we talk about boards. When we talk in the boards of directors, there are also, in my personal opinion, there are too many men's. And we need much more women there, much more ideas and support. But at the end of the day, I guess we should not talk as much about gender. It's, for me, talking about good managers and bad managers. And there are good women managers, as Angela Merkel, and also there are bad ones. Of course, there. Ira, you and me also can find a lot of good and bad man examples.
Absolutely. So what are some of the practices? What would you say are the top ones that you would suggest that people adopt pretty quickly?
The first practice and the most important thing is about focus. I described a little bit the 80-20 rule or the 80-20 principle, the Pareto principle there. This principle says, and it's a natural law, also comes true for business, that you have key employees, you have key clients, you have also key prospects and key products. And the mathematics say, and the law says, okay, 20% of your key employees, products, and also prospects makes 80% of the sales and 80% of the profits. So this is where you have to analyze your company, and you have to get together with your top management team and just to analyze, okay, what is the 80-20 in my company when it comes to customers, when it comes to market, when it comes to also to employees, and also marketing strategies. I mean, which channels we have to focus on. So this, I guess, is the first and also the most holistic recommendation I do have, really to focus, because nowadays managers and a lot of time company owners, I mean, they're not focusing enough on getting, for example, like the German companies, into a niche. In Germany, there are more than 1,500 niche companies, niche players, which are leading their market. There's no other country in the world who has more market leaders than Germany. So this is, I guess, where it comes all to, okay, focus on one product or on one service and try to be the best, with the best quality, with innovation, being relevant for your customers. And this is kind of the secret, as it's really simple, but it's the secret.
So your secret then, Thomas, is focus, focus, focus.
Yes.
So how is the U.S. falling behind in terms of employee well-being? Do you think it is?
I mean, when we talk about vacations in Germany, I mean, you have by law 20 to 25 days, paid days, vacations. Now, talking again a little bit about the power of the unions historically, and there are a lot of more benefits for the workforce when we talk about paid vacations, when we talk about social benefits, when we talk about insurance. So I guess there, what I have seen, the American companies have to adapt and have to change because nowadays I mean, hiring and also attracting talent gets more and more competitive, and so the companies kind of are forced to adapt new models.
For sure. So do you think it actually works for companies in the US to give unlimited time off? That's a whole different area. But many of our, what we think of as our most forward companies are giving unlimited time off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, you have to have a sound balance, I guess, also. I mean, to seeing also, I mean, the interest of the companies and the interest of the employees, but also it goes further. I mean, we have to focus not only on profits, but also on our employees, but also on our stakeholders. And nowadays, I mean, all the green and the circular economy trend it gets also really important. So it gets kind of much more sophisticated to design a business model, and designing a business model that includes employees, planet, and also profits. So I guess there, when we talk about business strategy, it gets more holistic.
Great.
Yeah, I'm curious. Are you familiar with the anti-fragile, the fragile anti-fragility model at all from Nassim Taleb? Because when you're talking about quality, it talks about Six Sigma, lean. You know, again, squeezing out inefficiencies, mistakes. But a lot of companies, and especially, and that's that was my first impression when I hear about German companies, that they thrive and, again, known for high quality, but do they become fragile? You know, do they take out, they squeezed out all the inefficiencies, but then a pandemic hits. How resilient, how do they rebound, how do they survive?
I mean, I guess, and this that does not only come true. For example, when I work for Adidas, also the important is that are the small and medium-sized businesses. Obviously, the big companies are somehow squeezing out and looking for productivity, but the most important companies in every country and the most important segment is the small and medium-sized segment. And
because
there,
that's
I guess,
where the growth is.
And there's growth, and actually, the small and medium-sized segment is the backbone of the German economy, and this backbone also in the U.S. economy. We have really to look for that. Not only the big companies change and giving more benefits to their workforce, more flexibility, but especially the small and medium-sized businesses. So I mean, it's a paradigm shift. It's a shift really not only for the big and the large companies, but more importantly, what I think for the small and medium-sized businesses.
So Thomas, we're getting close to the end here. We're running out of time. I want to make sure that we can let people know how to get the book. And I think, Joyce, we should probably change the name of the show to Just Scratching the Surface.
For sure.
So we do that. Thomas, your new book is Profitable Growth Strategies. Where can people get a hold of it?
You can find me on the homepage, profitablegrowthstrategy.com, and on LinkedIn, Thomas Michael Hawk, and really great to connect with you and your audience.
And Thomas, if we want to buy the book, is it available on your website?
Yeah, it's in Amazon. We have the audiobook also in Audible, so you can find the book, and hopefully I get some feedback.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, you'll definitely get some feedback, at least from me. I'll make sure. But yeah, I'm sure some of our listeners will go up, and I have the book, and it's an relatively easy read. So I encourage everybody to go get it. Thank you very much for taking time to come on the show. Appreciate it, and good luck.
Thanks, Thomas.
Joyce. Bye.
Bye.
I'm serious. I think we should do Just Scratching the Surface. Which is we're again some great topics, and it's interesting. I didn't intentionally try to align these two, but they overlap. I mean, all our speakers have complemented the others quite well. Just a reminder, especially for the first segment, women re-entering the workforce, vital to the recovery.
Thank you.
Herman Trend Alert. Herman Trend Alert.
Subscribe. Sign up.
You'll get it in your mailbox. I assume to read today's. If you want it right away, you'll go up to the website. And also make sure you subscribe to Googlizationnation.com. Appreciate that. That you'll get updates about the podcast, this week's, last week's, other events like the webinar
that's coming up.
Yeah, actually, we have
another one's coming up, right?
April 13th. You'll subscribe. You'll get information about that. We're going to be talking about the adaptability quotient, AQAI. You get an opportunity. That one is paid, but you get a reduced fee for it. And basically, we'll be talking about the results of that and helping you plan what you should do to that, whether it's in your career or your business. Final is make sure you go up and take the poll that we talked about, state of mind. Are you declining, coping, growing, or thriving? Appreciate that. One question takes you all of about 5 seconds to be able to do that. So I appreciate you doing that. Please be safe. Numbers are looking ugly again, starting to go up. And we're just at that brink. But hopefully we'll overcome that. And so we're not going back to normal, but hopefully we'll be prepared for the next waves of normal and go from there. Any closing comments, Joyce?
Just that I would like to reinforce what you said, that we're not out of the woods yet, and that we all need to do whatever we can do to stay safe. And that includes, if you're going out, wear a mask. If you're going to be in a place with other people, please stay physically distant. And we understand how frustrating it is at this point in time. However, we're almost there. So please, let's not stumble. now that we're almost there. Let's just stay the course.
And-
So
and-
thanks, Ira, for this great opportunity. And we had some wonderful guests today.
We did. Thank you, Kate Richmond from Muhlenberg College, Director of Gender Studies there. Thank you, Thomas Michael Hogg, new author of the new book, Profitable Growth Strategies. Thank you, Ngomu, for allowing us to be on the air and Success Performance Solution. And until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.
Bye, everyone.